I am pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on creating value for the new energy consumer. I am Stephen Anderson from Public Utilities Fortnightly. I came to the utility industry by way of the legal sector, where I've worked as a journalist since the mid-'90s, but I've been covering utilities for the Fortnightly for about 4 years now, and I've spent most of that time exploring various facets of the smart grid. I'm sure we have a very sophisticated audience here today, but I'll just state the obvious and say that the smart grid is no one thing but a whole tangled cluster of technologies, infrastructure, issues, products, and services. It's enough to keep me confused anyway, or at least actively challenged as I try to sort it all out. I think it's safe to say that the first generation of smart grid issues were largely technical. How you make the newfangled wires and switches work and figure out appropriate standards and things of that nature. It's the kind of a challenge that the industry is really built for. Nothing motivates engineers like new technological challenges, and many, if not most, of those things have been very successfully resolved. In recent years, however, the focus has shifted to something that's a lot less familiar to the industry, and that, of course, is consumer engagement. Now, the utility sector gets a bad rap for its track record when it comes to communicating with customers. Part of that is deserved, but to be fair, up to now, it really didn't need to be a priority. Customers are primarily concerned with cost and reliability. So historically, there wasn't much need for a dialogue that went very far beyond outages and the monthly bill. But for all the various technologies, products, and services associated with the smart grid to really work, and by that I mean to provide the efficiencies and the functionality that the industry is really counting on, it requires a robust, ongoing, collaborative relationship between the customer and their utility. Demand response, electric vehicles, home energy management, net metering, all require a new kind of relationship. And just how to construct and facilitate that relationship is the crux of the issue. A lot of very smart people across the country are wrestling with this challenge, and we're lucky to have two of them with us today. Irwin Furukawa is Senior Vice President for Customer Service at Southern California Edison. SCE is probably farther along in its smart meter rollout than any other U.S. utility. They're halfway to or more than halfway at this point, to their goal of installing 5 million advanced meters by the end of 2012. It's a $1.6 billion project that kicked off back in 2009. They already have a number of consumer engagement initiatives in the works, and I know from several stories that I've worked on that their strategy on this front has evolved significantly along the way, and I'm sure that Irwin has a lot of lessons to share from the things that SCE has learned as they've taken their trip down this smart grid road. I should mention also that Irwin comes to this from an interesting perspective. He didn't come up in the utility sector. Prior to joining SCE 4.5 years ago, he worked in the telecom industry. One of the most frequently drawn analogies to the smart grid challenge is what the telecom industry faced after Ma Bell was broken up in the 1980s. It was an environment that was driven not only by new companies, but by whole new types of products, services, and technologies. It's not a perfect analogy, but there's a strong correlation between the transformation of telecom and what we have ahead of us in the utility sector. But first up is going to be Greg Guthridge. Greg is Global Managing Director for Retail and Business Services for Utilities at Accenture. Now, Accenture has conducted a 3-year program of research on energy consumers, with the goal being a transformation from passive consumers to proactive, engaged consumers. Accenture's research is focused on what utilities can do to facilitate that evolution. It's worth noting that we often talk about the consumer in universal terms, when in fact no two are alike. One of the major thrusts of Accenture's research is how to break down that consumer base. There are various types. There are cautious conservatives who may be wary, but not averse to change. You have eager adopters, the first ones in line to buy EVs. You have people who have a high level of skepticism about any company, not just power companies. Some people have fears about privacy and health risks. The concerns may be valid or absurd, but they all have to be addressed. Each demographic requires its own messaging, its own products, and differing modes of communication. Age is a factor. young people might prefer to respond differently than older folks who want to continue to receive a paper bill. The point being that consumer engagement is not a single process, but a wide spectrum of processes and technologies. Greg is going to talk, among other things, about how the demographics break down and what that means for how utilities formulate their strategies going forward.
Stephen, thank you very much. This is Greg Guthridge here with Accenture, and very pleased to be here with my colleague Erwin today to give you a good overview of our most recent Accenture research. If you look at our first slide on the market context, I think Stephen covered a lot of this in his opening remarks, but clearly we are in the era of a new energy-consumer relationship. The changing face of the consumer with all the new technologies from smart metering, distributed generation, electric vehicles, demand response, energy efficiency, et cetera, all which sort of fall under this umbrella of smart grid, really is an amazing opportunity for utilities and energy providers to really think carefully about what their new relationship is with the consumer and how best to drive value both for the consumer and for the organization. As you can see on this chart, it's complex. As we move into this new world, there will be new channels, new products and services, new expectations. The more utilities and energy providers provide opportunities and options around products and services and pricing and energy efficiency-related programs, the more consumers will ask for more in terms of convenience, simplicity, new channels, mobility, et cetera. And so we're in an exciting era for energy providers across North America, and I'm really pleased today to share with you some of our research findings, and then, of course, working with Erwin, a leading example from Southern California Edison as to how they're putting a lot of this to use already in the Southern California marketplace. First, a little bit about the research that we've conducted at Accenture. It's a global research project that's a 3-year process. So far has included 19,000 consumers in 18 countries. It's really very closely focused on what are the new energy consumer preferences and behaviors, what do they look like in terms of segments, how will they behave under these new products and services, and what value propositions will intrigue them and attract them to change their current behavior, either in buying their new products and services or changing the way they use energy in their home. So this research is available. You can reach it at accenture.com/utilities. And there's a significant amount of detail, of course, which we can't cover in our short time today. I'll cover just some of the highlights. On the next slide, there are 9 key findings. There's some that came out of our 2010 research around some of the paradoxes and the emerging barriers and channel diversification of consumers. But really today we'll focus on 4 key findings that have come out from our 2011 research. These include some of the interesting new partnerships or emerging market players, convergence that is occurring within utilities and energy provider space in this beyond the meter or home capability. Second, we'll talk a little bit about price and the importance of price, but some of the other value levers which play a role in driving consumer adoption, interest, and sustainable behavior changes. Third, we'll cover diverse consumer preferences and the fact that really consumers are much more complex as an energy user than we can imagine. And then finally, some of the different value propositions that we believe will be important in the future. So we'll look at first at the next slide, which is finding number 1. And again, as I said, there's a lot more research available on the Accenture's website. But the first finding was fairly interesting, which basically, as we ask consumers, what is your first instinct in terms of looking at energy-related products and services, demand response, energy efficiency, in-home capabilities of any shape and size? Most consumers immediately would recognize, in this case 73%, that their utility or their energy provider is the first port of call for them. This is a big vote of confidence for utilities, in particular energy providers in North America, which sometimes don't have the highest level of trust. However, with that as a backdrop, you'll notice that over a quarter, 25%, would actually almost immediately consider a non-traditional provider. This could be a Best Buy or a Home Depot or any of the other large consumer-related products and service companies, as well as telco or related home providers. If you look at slide 6, we went on to ask consumers if there were bundling that was occurring, so basically an energy product and service like gas and electricity was bundled with an in-home product. You'll see that over 59%, in fact as close to 73% of respondents would consider at least one other provider. What this ultimately tells us is that the most successful consuming energy providers in the future will be those that can provide partnerships and collaborate with other non-traditional providers in creating a more compelling value proposition, and that it's not a given that consumers will immediately go to their energy provider for all of the new in-home, beyond-the-meter energy products and services which are currently being envisioned over the next 5 to 15 years. I want to pause here for a moment and actually ask Erwin a quick question. Erwin, as a pioneer in this space, Southern California Edison certainly has experience in partnering with a number of non-traditional providers. Can you comment quickly on some of the value propositions that have been most successful at SCE?
Oh, sure, Greg. I think one of the things that we discovered early in the game is that our strategic alliance partners, or these external companies, play such a critical role to customers in not only educating them about energy usage, but also presenting them the different options that customers can have. We found that we were very effective in terms of reaching our customers from an energy provider point of view, but yet really the compelling moment for customers when it comes to major decisions comes at the point of purchase. And therefore, one of the strongest allies that we have is in the retail sector, where we think about when a customer goes into whether they're buying a consumer electronics device or an appliance or whatever, that they begin to think about energy consumption, to think about the Energy Star, they think about Southern California Edison, and the different types of rebates and services that we provide them. So we looked at retailers as one of our strategic alliance partners, so that as we begin to demonstrate the value of what the smart grid and what the smart meter provides to customers, the retail experience actually provides them with the education to the customer to show them how it works and what types of products and services that they can offer that complement the various packages that we provide.
It's perfect, Erwin, and clearly I think Southern California Edison is very much a pioneer in some of these more creative partnerships, and we can see this trend now picking up not just in North America, but even more broadly across the globe, where some very creative relationships are forming between big box retailers, home security providers, telecommunications companies, etc. So we see this as an important variable in providing local energy providers maybe with more credibility and trust, but also, as you said, Erwin, creating a more experience-oriented education upfront cycle, which is quite important with some of these more complex new products and services. Moving now to slide 7 and our beyond price finding. One of the more interesting findings from our research, we asked very clearly what consumers regard as a means to move or to change their behavior. And clearly, the most important variable is some kind of a price signal, and we know that. That price signal can be anywhere between 5 and 15%. It can be in the form of an ongoing discount or a rebate or any number of different variations in between. Price is king, and that variable is not going away. But Erwin, what we found that was quite interesting, and you can see on slide 8, that price and price alone is not actually enough of a variable. I think probably because energy is still, for the most part, a small percentage of the pocketbook, and for people to change and sustain some kind of a behavior change or buy a new product and service, there needs to be something more than just a price signal, just a discount or rebate. So we asked consumers specifically, well, what else could there be? This chart here on slide 8 shows that everything from loyalty, reward programs, service, convenience, new channels, interesting ways in which information can be displayed, even new, more creative bundling of products and services. all combined with a price signal, can actually create more interest in a broader population of the consumer and effectively attract them to sustain their behavior beyond the initial interest. And with that, I want to ask Erwin another question here around finding number 2. Erwin, in your experience, how have you combined price, or how are you kind of taking your learnings from time of use and some of these other more complex prices? And I'm in particular most interested in some of your experiences from telco and how those might actually relate to our environment.
Okay, sure, Greg. What was shared earlier during my introduction from Steve was that my background is in the telecom arena, and I think that many of us as consumers of telecom services, we can relate back to the days as to when there was a time when telecom services were priced as a time-of-use service. So when you think back in those days, you knew that you were not going to place your personal calls, whether if they were long-distance calls, you would do it during the day because those were at the peak time. And you would do it typically after 5 or on weekends, all day Saturday, and I think Sunday before 5 or 6 o'clock was the time period. But that was the way that we were accustomed in terms of how pricing was. And as consumers, we always thought that time of use was something that was very important, and we managed our lifestyles and the way that we used the product based on that. What's interesting is that as telecom has matured over the past few years, the concept of time of use has disappeared, and suddenly all of a sudden you saw things like 5 cents per minute, anytime, anywhere, any place. And I think we all can relate to that. Then after the 5 cents, all of a sudden it became flat, which was at a fixed fee. It's called unlimited usage. And that was a whole other concept that took customers by surprise, and really it was like another educational effort in terms of, okay, now I don't have to make these decisions. I can place those calls. It's all about convenience, and I could do whatever I want. Then it's all about the service that my provider will provide. In the energy sector, of course, we're doing exactly the opposite of that. And that's what's so interesting right now, and that's the challenge that many of us have right now in educating customers who've gone through this trajectory in the telecom arena, but now on the energy sector where they are accustomed to paying relatively a flat price, that we have to start educating them again to say, there's a differentiation between the price point of when you use energy and obviously how much you use. So with that, what's very important that we're finding is that education is a fundamental tool. Teaching people again about how energy is priced and when are the peak times and when they're not. And then having very easy, understandable pricing incentives. So as you said, some customers rally around getting that incentive, but that alone isn't going to do the job. What they're going to need to know is it's going to have to be convenient, understandable, and you're going to have some type of device or capability to signal to them when these events are going to occur and how to go ahead and participate. And therefore, when you look at the Edison story in terms of our Smart Connect deployment and the engagement we have, we put in some very simple tools that will be available to customers both online and through mobile services that will actually educate them and allow them to participate.
Erwin, that's great, and I remember the days of friends and family and evenings and weekends, some of the old programs that we used to see on TV around telco, and I do agree with you. It is fairly interesting to see this movement towards very simple pricing today for energy to a much more complex real-time or time-of-use or peak-based pricing in the future. And I believe you're exactly right, and the research that we've done within Accenture points out as well that those energy providers that can provide very simple, convenient programs, it will serve their consumers, the broad base, much better. And if they can bundle that with some other kind of value add, whether that be loyalty points or some other bundled product and service, they have a much better chance of attracting more consumers to these new programs over the long haul. So moving to slide 9 and moving on to our third finding, it will not be a surprise to most of the individuals who've dialed into today's discussion that the utilities in the past have treated most of their consumers as a one-size-fits-all, especially true of the residential marketplace where if you call the call center or you receive a bill, generally speaking, it's the same kind of service provided to every consumer and roughly the same products and capabilities. clearly, as we move into this much more complex smart grid-enabled world of beyond-the-meter new products and services, one of the most important variables is that there's differentiation and segmentation, so that energy providers are not treating all of their consumers as a one-size-fits-all, that they're tailoring their programs and their products to different segments of consumers, partly so that they can make them more attractive to consumers, and then also to manage the cost of these different programs and not waste valuable resources on trying to sell consumers something that they're not interested in. If you see on this slide, it's a little bit of a complex slide, but our research points out that there's roughly 6 variable segments, and of course they go by different names in different locations around the world. But you can see it tends to follow everything from the tech savvies all the way through to the cost sensitives. And each of these individual segments want a different kind of service profile. They want different products and services. They want a completely different kind of treatment. And utilities in the future, we believe, will be most successful if they can tailor their products and services and their full operations, not just their sales capability, but their full back operations, to really treat these consumers as they want to be treated and provide the kinds of products and services that are most relevant to them. So with that as a backdrop, Erwin, what is your experience with operationalizing what's clearly a very complex and diverse consumer set?
Well, Greg, I think you hit it right on. When you think about how energy has been provided to customers, it was like historically, when you think about it, it was all about making sure that when customers turned the lights on, the lights went on. When they turned it off, it went off. And once a month, they got the bill. And that bill better be accurate. And if there was a dispute, we were able to reconcile that whole thing. But those were the years before, as we enter in the era of smart grid and energy usage and having an intelligent way of managing energy. And in order to accomplish that, you need to be able to engage that customer beyond that, beyond the simple turn on, turn off, and a bill. You've got to be able to reach them effectively and talk to them and communicate to them in ways that resonate with them personally. And I think as we look across the room or all the players that are on this call today, you could think about the diversity that we have as consumers in terms of what piques our interest, what are we turned on, and what are some of the things that we really just don't relate to. The same concept goes into the way that we at Southern California Edison segment our customers. We identify our customers and we segment them into buckets that basically say that we have some customers, for instance, that are very pro-environment, very green conscious, want to do the right thing for the environment. And we have to make sure that the messages that we communicate, that we tailor, the offers that we tailor, resonate with them and that they are willing to go ahead and participate in that. You've got other segments where people want to save money, and especially in today's economy, and you see what's going on with the unemployment figures that are hitting California, money is precious, and people need to save money and want to save money. So these are the cost saver segments. So they're going to be very much interested in different ways on how they can reduce their energy, how they can save money. And so those are the key messages that we want to do there. And then you've got some customers who just want to be comfortable. And it's like, leave me alone. If it's hot, I want to turn on the air conditioner. And if it's cold, I'm going to turn the heat up. And I'm just going to be comfortable with that. And those customers, too, you've got to be able to address those to make sure that they understand what options there are in the event that they want to participate. But you also know specifically what is the key messaging way to communicate to them. So segmentation plays a very, very key role, especially because you need customer engagement to make smart meters effective.
Yeah, and Erwin, I think one of the things that always impresses us about Southern California and the work that you've done in your marketplace is the fact that not only have you created these segments, but that you really genuinely are pulling through your messaging, through your marketing, through your sales, even to the point at which you're developing your products and services to be relevant and specific and very targeted to each of these different segments. We believe that's a best practice and something that's really important to the cost effectiveness of the programs, as well as to achieving, ultimately, interest with each of these different segments. It's really great stuff. I think if we move on to slide 10 now in our final finding around unlocking the value in the household, one of the things that comes out fairly clear is that there's a series of unconventional values and preferences that actually are very important to consumers. And I'll start with one of the most important backdrops, which is that when you look at segmentation, and you can segment customers based on any number of things, from their values to their behaviors to their socioeconomic and demographic information. But there's one variable that comes up over and over again as being a really important one when we think about the products and services and the channels and the moments of truth for consumers, and that's their discretionary time. How much time does that consumer have, and what role does that play in terms of how they buy their products and services of the future, how they'll interact with their energy provider, et cetera? With that as a backdrop, this chart on slide 10 shows that really there's a number of other variables, some of which are extremely important, which range from customized or tailored personal needs of usage, things that simplify. And I think certainly as we look at the backdrop of pilots and various other smart grid-related pricing programs that have been piloted throughout North America, those that have been simple and easy to understand have been much more successful than the very highly complex data-oriented pilots, especially in the mass market residential area. Family plays an important role, and one of our key findings is that consumers of the future aren't just the bill payer of the household; they're all the consumers in that household. And understanding and creating products and services beyond the meter and related these energy efficiency programs that consider the whole family is very important. Beyond that, there's other variables around the influence of technology in the home, actually making it fun, which I think we're still a ways away from understanding how energy efficiency in the home can be a fun activity. But you can see some of the other variables here that energy providers, as they consider their new products and services, might influence their thinking. On slide 12, we found another very interesting convenience-oriented capability, and it's really focused on how many consumers will prefer set and forget versus more of a customized program. And the key headline here is that there is a significant number of consumers that actually don't really want a whole lot of information and don't really necessarily want a lot of personal activity in managing their home. They'd actually prefer more of a set and forget where everything's done for them. And the really interesting thing here is they'll actually forego some level of savings or even pay a premium if they can get their energy provider or some other provider to do much more of the set and forget capabilities for them. Another finding that we highlight in the final slides here is that face-to-face, believe it or not, face-to-face interaction as a channel is back. And Erwin, you know, even from telecom, but certainly in the utilities industry here in North America, we have spent the last 10 to 20 years methodically closing all of our local shops and payment centers, et cetera, and really depersonalizing the customer experience. But as these products and services get more complex in the home, there's actually a return to the need. And you mentioned it earlier in terms of education and various other more complex interactions that consumers are going to need. So I'm curious, clearly there's a lot of interest in mobility and some of those channels. That's very clear. But what's your findings in terms of some of these more unconventional new channels like face-to-face?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think this is a real fundamental thing about the way the business is transforming itself and how how not only the marketplace is transforming, but with the entrance of a number of third parties that are entering the marketplace, customers now are having more choices and are being presented with a number of different opportunities. From the energy provider standpoint, we've got to think about what it is. What does it mean in terms of providing energy services to our customers? Customers, when they're engaging with us, you want to make it convenient and you want to make it at the time when they want to do the transaction or the business with us. So some of the simple transactions, such as establishing a service or inquiring about a bill or maybe doing a bill arrangement or whatever, if customers can do those things online or be able to do that as a self-serve without having to speak to an account rep, then they're going to want to do that. And I think probably many of us on this call, have a preference sometimes to do some of our shopping or make our airline reservations or whatever, to be able to do that without speaking to anybody and just doing that from an online experience. But when it comes to some of the more complex things, such as home area networks or device registration synchronizations, those are the types of things that as consumers become introduced to these types of applications or these devices, they need to have that face-to-face and that human interaction. And that's why when I think about the retail experience, when customers go in to buy an electronic device, they love, and I don't know about you, but I personally love to go into that store and be able to talk to that sales representative, play with that gadget, and push those buttons and let that that retail person explain to me what I just did, right? But to be able to understand what the functionality and what that application and all the whiz-bang, devices that those things can do. And that's the same concept here, is that as these types of devices come on the marketplace, customers are going to be curious about that, and they're going to want to be able to talk about it. And especially as some of these devices become integrated into full home area networks. So if you picture that, if you think about a home area network that manages not only your communications, but your entertainment, but your energy, those are all robust applications that people are going to want to talk to somebody and see how the devices work. And that's really where the resources need to be deployed. And we've got to think from a customer perspective, we've got to do that right.
Yeah, Erwin, I agree with you. It's such an exciting time, I think, for energy providers with all these new products and services and in-home capabilities on their way over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. What an exciting opportunity for energy providers to really think about all of the consumer-oriented capabilities, whether that be face-to-face. I really like the description that you gave in terms of energy providers having multiple different kinds of relationships. On one hand, they're going to have a high-touch, high-value, highly tuned, experience-oriented relationship, face-to-face, touch and feel. On the other hand, energy providers will provide lots of self-serve through convenient mobility-related channels, and getting that mix will be really important in terms of cost management, and of course, that all of this comes at a cost from an operations perspective. So getting that balance right will be really key. Erwin, to transition over to you, because I think your presentation now around the specific example of what you've done at Southern California Edison is so interesting. A couple quick summary points. Our research clearly points to these 4 key trends. The first is new places and new faces, so new channels and new consumer relationships. The second is the power of collaboration, and you talked briefly around the importance of partnering with third parties and bundling new products and services to create a more compelling value proposition. The third is around the innovation imperative. There is quite the sophistication in terms of thinking through these new pricing, new products, and new service bundles and capabilities. And really, this isn't a core competency of a lot of traditional energy providers. This is something that we'll all need to work on. And then finally, information is the new currency. The importance of analytics, not just for the sake of analytics, but really to drive differentiated and tailored service to specific end consumer segments, and the importance of that from the overall equation. So thank you very much for letting me give you a quick overview of our research. Of course, more is available at Accenture.com/utilities. And now I really want, Erwin, for you to give a quick overview of really how you've put this all to use in real life in one of the most progressive utilities here in North America.
Okay, sure. Let me start out by giving everyone a basic introduction in terms of what Southern California Edison is and who we are. We're one of the largest electric utilities in the United States. We've been around for 125 years. In fact, this is a big year for us in terms of our celebration. We serve about 50,000 square miles in the Southern California area, and I think what's really significant there is that if you look at our territory, we cover everything from the coastline, from the beaches, all the way through the deserts and to the mountains. And so you can think about the diversity of the climate zones that we reach, and also the diversity of our customer base. And so when you think about how we deploy meters to each of these customers, you see how the customization is very, very important on how we introduce the meter, how we install it, and how we engage the customers. One of the other things about our company is that we've been an industry leader in terms of renewable energy, and in our electric transportation, our electric vehicles, we were one of the pioneers in terms of working with the auto manufacturers and getting the support systems in place for the delivery of electric vehicles, and of course with our smart grid and smart metering deployment. Let me start out with, we talk about smart grid vision, and what's interesting is that when you mention the word smart grid, and you ask people within the utility, within our own company, what smart grid means, you get a definition, and we have the smartest people, and you talk to them, and you listen to their definition. It's fascinating. I think many of us can relate to that. And then let's contrast that with our customers and what customers think smart grid means. And I think this is a really good way to kind of start in terms of depicting where the two parties are really coming from. So let's go ahead and roll that video.
I think what the smart grid does is it's a transformational change where we are actually going to equip our customers with the ability to manage their electricity like they would their gasoline. They're going to be able to use their electricity accordingly and save money and save energy.
Smart grid to me means empowering customers with the tools, technology, and information to manage their energy usage.
It allows us to really have a new transparency with our customer because they can see what they're using on a real-time basis.
Smart grid to me is a new system or environment of how we're going to inform customers and provide them better information about their energy usage.
Southern California Edison for quite a while has had a very smart grid, but when we look at the national smart grid effort, we're looking at a much bigger system. Basically, the smart grid is a layer of network and sensing devices among our grid so that we can have better control and sensing information coming back to us.
The smart grid is going to allow us to meet all of the state's policies and legislation going forward. It involves the integration of the electric vehicle for our customers, and it involves providing good data for our customers to make good decisions. And the last overarching part of the smart grid is the IT systems or system of systems that will be necessary in order to integrate everything from customer devices all the way up to the central generation and everything in between.
A smart grid is an electrical grid that is more efficient and it knows how to divert power to people who need it and when they need it.
I don't know what smart grid is.
I don't really know, but I think it sounds like something like they hook up a computer with the grid.
Smart grid? I'm not really sure what that is, so I really couldn't tell you what it means to me, unfortunately.
I don't actually know what the smart grid is. No, we have no idea what it is. Can you tell us what it is?
It's like power lines, but underground.
Okay, I think that video gives you an idea in terms of the disconnect. I love that video because it really does contrast a lot of the things that we talk about as professionals in this industry about what smart grid is, and we talk it from the technical aspects in terms of what it's going to do and stuff. And if you go to all those conferences, you can all relate to that. But yet, if you ask the average customer that's out there, that's kind of pretty much where they're coming from. And that's the challenge that we have as an industry, is that how do you get the message across about what smart grid is, what it's going to provide, and what's most importantly, why is it important for customers, and what's the benefit to the customer. So as we look at this, let's start out with in terms of our definition, in terms of what the smart grid vision for us. The basic fundamental thing here is that Southern California Edison sees the smart grid vision is that we as the utility are the integrator of various demand-side management programs, like with the customers, in terms of like how they use energy, energy and how they reduce energies, but also the integration of renewable energy along with energy from our grid, along with future applications such as the plug-in electric vehicle and future storage devices. So as a smart grid vision, it's not only being able to provide the reliability and an affordable network for our customers, but it's their ability to be able to integrate all these different devices and these different sources of energy into one so that we could provide a sustainable and seamless energy stream to our customers. So moving on into the next slide, what I'd like to do is when we think about like what's transpiring in the marketplace, we think about like how things are evolving, how people are using energy is changing. I mean, you think about, for instance, like electric vehicles. In Southern California today, we have about 1,300 electric vehicles in our territory as of the 1st of September, and over 1,000 of those right now are Chevy Volts or Nissan Leafs. So we're expecting about 110 additional new Volts or Leafs in this upcoming month. But you could see that, there's been some delays in terms of the deployment of electric vehicles, but those will continue to rise as the time comes. And with that, we have to be prepared to be able to support customers with that. Also, how people manage their usage is changing. That's why, having the online experience and having information available to customers in a very simple way, that's something that's very understandable for them and so that they could relate to, is very, very important. Where people get energy is also changing. There's a number of things, like, for instance, in California, we have the California Solar Initiative, where we offer rebates to customers to buy and install solar at their homes. And that has been an overwhelming success in terms of customer participation. And then finally, how the network is changing, and that ties in beginning with our deployment of the smart meters. And as you heard earlier, we're on our way to completing over 5 million households by the end of next year. When we look at the engagement in terms of customers, we think about how we historically have provided services with customers. And typically, when you think about the utility-customer relationship, it's one way. A customer calls us, we go ahead and turn the lights on. And the only time that customer ever heard from us was once a month when they got a bill, or if there was an outage, they contacted us, and then we would go ahead and fix it, and then we would let them know. But those are pretty much the only types of engagement we have. Where we're headed for is this mutual engagement, where customers have information or questions, we respond to that. We enroll customers with solutions that are targeted to them, and then we build an ongoing relationship. And this is an ongoing relationship that continues down the energy management journey. So if you look at this, I think that videos, and one of my favorite things is cartoons. I love cartoons. And this is a cartoon that we put together called I Got the Power. And it's a very short one, but I think it depicts the story in a very simple manner in terms of what is the smart meter for the customer. So let's roll that.
Hey, Carl? What's with the lights? Blow a fuse or something?
I wish. Ugh, the electric bill's here.
There's a better way to lower your bill than sitting in the dark and hoping for the best.
What, unplug the refrigerator?
No, Edison Smart Connect is coming. It's a new way to manage your electric consumption, and it could help you lower your electric bills. It'll all start when Southern California Edison replaces our old meters with a new Edison Smart Connect meter. Now, the new meter will send data to your personal online dashboard at SCE.com, where you'll be able to see how much electricity you're using every day, by the hour. By taking charge of your electricity usage through Edison Smart Connect programs like Save Power Days and Budget Assistant, you'll waste less electricity, save money, and help the environment. So you'll never have a surprise at the end of the month with Edison Smart Connect.
Ooh, I think his wife just saw the electric bill.
Why wait? Use my account on SCE.com today. You can also learn about all the other great programs SCE has, so we can all save energy, money, and the environment.
Okay, well, I think that hopefully you enjoyed that, and that is just a sample. For instance, we have a number of these vignettes created with a number of our products and services. And I think the challenge, when I first joined the company and joined this industry, I didn't realize how complex it was. I mean, as you work in this company and as you talk to other people in this industry, the terminologies and the terms, dynamic pricing, demand response, peak time rebates, all of those concepts are just mind-boggling to the average customer. And what's very important is to make this thing work is you've got to really make this simple. And that's what the whole concept with the cartoons is, to be able to just share some of this information with customers so that they could understand it. And this is on YouTube. It's off of our website. And also what's interesting is we're beginning to show this in theater trailers. So when you go to a movie and you're waiting for your movie to start up and you're waiting and you're kind of getting annoyed because the thing keeps going off, you're going to see one of these things. So we're trying to reach customers in a number of different manners. Okay, so the next slide, we talk about our Smart Connect deployment here. And as you heard earlier, at this point, we're over 5 million meters that will be installed. Today, we have just a little over 3 million meters, and right now we'll be cutting those, not only installing those meters, but then we'll be doing what's called cut over to operation. And that means that's where customers actually begin to see the interval data. And we have over 1.1 million customers now in our territory who are now getting that real-time information back from the meter. So it's a very exciting time for us. Now, I think one of the things that is very important, and what I find with customers, is that not only to make it simple, but also really kind of paint the picture in terms of what that whole experience looks like. So we created this thing called the Smart Energy Experience in one of our facilities in Southern California. And what we did was we used this as a demonstration center of showing how what smart energy living is. It goes everything from the devices to smart meters to the plug-in electric vehicles and how all that works and how people can manage their everyday life with that. So this is just a brief little video just kind of giving people a glimpse in terms of what that display looks like.
Welcome to Southern California Edison's Smart Energy Experience. We call this the Smart Energy Experience because it showcases some of the latest tools and technologies that will lead to a cleaner, smarter energy future. Our hope is that this experience will encourage you to change the way you think about and use electricity, and show you how new technologies and a smarter grid will help SCE reduce greenhouse gases, support new plug-in electric vehicles, and isolate power outages. Here at Southern California Edison, we manage all aspects of electric energy for more than 14 million people, from power production, transmission through the lines, all the way until it reaches our communities, where we use that energy in our home and businesses. We are leading the way in developing technologies for a smarter grid.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea in terms of what the Smart Energy Experience is all about. It's been in operations now for about a year, and what's really terrific about this is that some of the future technologies that we demonstrate in this, they're coming to reality right now. So it's very exciting, and it certainly is an opportunity for us to continue to update and provide even more future technologies that we foresee. I think one of the things, too, that as we're beginning to see now is this whole deployment of home area network solutions and devices. And, there's many of the utilities across the country have been in various stages in terms of deploying some of these devices with customers and have had mixed use or a mixed response from customers. And, frankly, at this point, we, too, are anticipating kind of like a mixed response on it. We're going to be doing a trial on this thing where we'll be seeding the market with devices across our territory. And the plan is to be able to deploy these devices, get customers to understand the benefits of the smart meters, to see what consumption is all about and what a device does and what impact it has to their energy usage, and then to couple that with the online tools so that we can get them into an engaged solution. So we'll begin the pilot of these various devices through our territories. We are picking customers from each of the different segments that we talked about so that we want to see what the reaction is and so forth. And frankly, as you look at these in-home displays, I think that this is going to be the first wave of just getting customers introduced to it. These will soon be integrated into more robust, comprehensive solutions, whether they're the full, robust energy management systems or via a dongle switch onto the computer. But, you need to have that variety there available for customers during these early stages. So that is my presentation there, and hopefully we're on time here. So we just turn it back to Steve.
Erwin, I think the first thing I'd like to know is what you think, just for a quick takeaway, most utilities could be focusing on that they're not, based on your experience in the telecom industry.
I think what most utilities need to think about, you've got to think about the customer. You've got to be able to break down the customer into the segments and know that not all customers are really excited about our product. They just take it for granted, and I think most of us realize that. And so the real thing to think about is, how do you take a product that customers just have become accustomed to, take for granted, but also to take it seriously so that they would actually take action to that. And that's the real trick about it, because you've got to provide an offer. You have to way to communicate that to a customer in a way that's meaningful to them, that they would easily understand, and that they could then engage with, and that has incentives that really motivate them. And that depends on, again, the type of customer that you're dealing with.
Right. I want to get one quick takeaway from you too as well, Greg. You mentioned the simplicity as a real driver in this area. As we've discussed, this is a very complicated issue. Maybe you can give me just one quick takeaway on how utilities can make this very complicated area offer simplicities to consumers.
Sure. I think that Erwin and I have had a number of discussions around what does it mean to make things very simple, and it comes in many forms and fashions. It comes in how you present the information over the web or on your bill, that it's extremely simple, that you're not overwhelming the consumer with information and data that they may not necessarily be able to understand. The big takeaway here is if the more complex you make the program for the consumer to understand, the more difficult it is to keep them attracted to it, and oftentimes it increases the utility's costs in terms of supporting the numbers of questions and inquiries that you might get. So simplicity is the key to the channels and to the presentation of these new products and services and pricing structures. It keeps consumers interested, but it also, quite frankly, balances the cost of the utility in terms of supporting these programs when consumers have questions.
Okay. Well, I think as a function of the complexity of this topic, most of the questions that we have from online are very complicated, and we are running short of time. But I want to assure all of our attendees that we will follow up with each of those questions individually via email and get answers to you. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and especially our participants, Greg and Erwin. Thank you very much.